Well, I just wanted to say welcome to the Youth Action webinar series hosted by the Office of Community and Youth and Community Restoration. Today's webinar will focus on OYCR's Youth Advisory Board. The purpose of the OYCR Youth Justice Action webinar series is to provide all juvenile justice stakeholders with the information on practices and trends that highlight the shifting landscape of juvenile justice field to improve outcomes for children, families, youth, and communities. We have a few announcements to share before we introduce our guest speakers for today. Please be sure to keep your microphone muted during today's presentation. We welcome you to share your thoughts and questions in the chat throughout today's presentation. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted on the OYCR Training Resources page. You will receive a copy of the slides via email following the webinar. Today's session has been certified for 1 hour of STC credit. To receive credit for attending, you must stay for the duration of the webinar. In today's webinar, you will learn about OYCR's Juvenile Justice Toolkit and how to how to use it, select programming options for youth. Sorry, y'all, I got tongue twisted. I'll hand it over to Lisa Tadlock, Lead Health Program Specialist at OYCR, to introduce the speakers for today.
Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate the introduction. As mentioned, I'm Lisa Tadlock, and I'm with the OYCR. I'm in the Health Policy Division, and we are really pleased to have Dr. Megan Novisky and Eric Willoughby from the University of Cincinnati Corrections Institute hosting or participating in this webinar. This is a partnership that's been in development for quite some time between the University of Cincinnati, OYCR, and the Council on Criminal Justice and Behavioral Health. They are sunsetting as of June 30th of this year, and OYCR will be assuming the responsibilities and the updates working with RAND and the University of Cincinnati. Dr. Novisky is a senior research associate at the University of Cincinnati Corrections Institute. She leads research on conditions of confinement, incarceration, health impacts, and justice system policy and practice. She's a multi-method scholar and expert in qualitative methodology. Her work has been published in top peer-reviewed journals, including Criminology, Justice Quarterly, and Journal of Correctional Healthcare. In addition to her research, she delivers evidence-based trainings on corrections focused on substance use, employment, aggression, and core correctional practices. Eric Willoughby here is a research associate with the University of Cincinnati Corrections Institute with over 15 years experience delivering effective individual and group interventions to justice-involved individuals. As UCI's curriculum coordinator, he leads curriculum development, training, and implementation of structured cognitive behavioral interventions across the country. Eric brings a deep expertise in quality improvement and fidelity in the principles of effective intervention, and has developed numerous virtual trainings to support correctional professionals and agencies. As mentioned, we are really excited with OYCR to be in partnership with them and to have created this toolkit to bring evidence-based and community-based practices to your fingertips, or I want to say to your laptops or your computer systems. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Novisky now to continue on. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here today and sharing your presumably lunch hour with us. We really appreciate you carving that time into your day and coming to learn a little bit more about the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit. I do have an agenda posted just so you can see where we're going to be spending our time for the next, I don't know, 55 minutes, I guess. So we started with a little bit of introductions. I'll tell you a little bit more about UCCI here in a minute, but then we're going to shift and focus on the background of the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit, tell you a little bit about the toolkit and why a toolkit was developed. And then Eric will give you a little demonstration about the toolkit so you can see how to apply it and some of the features of it, how to use it. And then we're going to talk about some plans for training and technical assistance that are coming up and offer some opportunities for you all to work with us a bit more around the toolkit. And we will close with some questions. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to drop them into the chat. One of our other colleagues, Jen Scott, is joining us today, and she's going to keep an eye on the chat and compile those questions so we can make sure that we answer everything at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Lisa was already kind enough to introduce us, but we do have another colleague here today, Jen Scott, who's a project manager at UCCI. She is very skilled in marketing. She's been helping us get the word out about the toolkit, and she's here joining us today. If you have questions during the presentation, like I said, you can drop them in the chat, or you can send Jen a direct message and she'll track those. You could also send an email or a text to either of those options that are listed there that you can see. In addition to Eric, Jen, and I, we have a larger team at UCCI who are working on the project and getting word out about the toolkit and working with agencies and organizations about it. So there are 6 of us working on the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit, and I just wanted to post everybody's friendly face because as the year continues to move forward, you may hear from one or multiple of us as we continue to push forward on toolkit efforts. I wanted to share just a little bit about our vision and mission at the UCCI in case you're not familiar with our work. So after developing the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit, OYCR and RAND decided to partner with us to assist with efforts to raise awareness across the state about the toolkit, to provide education and technical assistance opportunities on the toolkit, and develop resources for agencies to use as they begin using the toolkit. And to offer a broader bird's eye view of the UCCI and the work that we do, we work alongside agencies to identify gaps in service delivery. We respond by developing innovative approaches, and we pilot these offerings in real-world applications. Our vision is to positively impact lives and shape safer communities, and our mission is essentially to champion evidence-based practices in corrections, which makes us really thrilled to be a part of this toolkit project. The UCCI was founded in 2002 under the leadership of Ed Latessa. We have an extensive history of collaboration with partners around the world, and we've served over 50,000 correctional staff worldwide. We've developed many products that are currently used by correctional agencies, including curricula that address substance use, violence, antisocial thinking, and gaps in employment. Regarding California specifically, UCCI has directly contracted with 39 of the 58 counties to provide training and technical assistance on evidence-based practices. We've also worked with multiple statewide departments, associations, and entities to bring training and technical assistance to probation and correction staff in California. And now that I have told you a little bit about us, I thought it would be nice to check in and see where everyone is joining us from today. So we have 148 participants on the call right now, which is amazing. If you could in the chat, just take a minute and share which county you're joining us from, just so we can get a sense for who's here today. Amazing. It looks like there's a lot of representation across the entire state. So really happy you all are here. And hopefully you recognize some familiar faces because I see duplicates across counties as well. All right, as people are continuing to enter where they're from into the chat, we do have a couple of polls to get us started here. And the first poll that I'd like you to answer is how familiar are you with California's Juvenile Justice Toolkit? So go ahead and select either not at all familiar, somewhat familiar, or very familiar, and then we'll check in and see what the results are. Okay, and the results are back. It looks like 73% of folks who answered the poll question are not at all familiar with the toolkit, 24% somewhat familiar, and 3% very familiar. Eric, you weren't supposed to answer the poll question. I'm guessing my colleague Eric answered the very familiar. Just teasing him.
Yes, maybe. No.
Um, so great. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go ahead and jump to the next poll question then, which is related. And the second question is, what is your level of experience using the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit? So go ahead and let us know if you have no experience using it yet, some experience, or extensive experience using the toolkit. All right, and the answers are back. Not really that surprising considering the answers on the first question. The majority of you, 95%, don't have any experience using the toolkit yet. So what I love about these responses is you all are in the right place. We want you to leave the webinar today feeling, number one, that you have a little bit of experience with the toolkit. And number two, or that you're more familiar with the toolkit. And number two, that you have gotten to use it a little bit. So you'll see here in a minute that the toolkit is live and publicly available. So you'll have an opportunity to kind of play around with it. You'll see some demonstrations from us, and hopefully you'll leave today feeling a little more familiar with it. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. And before we introduce you to the toolkit itself, we wanted to offer a little context about its development. So why a toolkit? There are 4 key reasons behind the toolkit's development, and they're all rooted in the real-world challenges that correctional partnerships and community-based organizations face on a daily basis. Number one being that the number of programs and practices can be really overwhelming. So there are so many interventions out there. And we like having a lot of choices, but the number of choices can also be a barrier when there's so many options that it's hard to know where to start. So you combine that with a lot of staff already being stretched really thin, sorting through all the possibilities can be cumbersome or problematic. Number two, there's multiple tiers of evidence to consider. So when someone says the term evidence-based, that can mean all kinds of things. And so it's important when picking a program or practice to understand what it means when you see the term evidence or when you pick a program or practice. Not all evidence is created equal. Some programs are backed by rigorous research, while others might only have preliminary or anecdotal support behind them. So understanding what counts as strong evidence and what doesn't can be confusing and time-consuming. So that's another reason this toolkit was created to help navigate that. Number 3, research is a bit of a moving target. It's updated frequently. The field's constantly evolving and changing. New studies are published, best practices shift, and what was considered effective 5 years ago might not hold up today. So staying current is essential. It's also a major challenge. I mean, what was being done in the field 30 years ago looks a lot different in a lot of applications now. So trying to keep up with updated research was another reason the toolkit was created. Finally, counties have varying needs. California, as you're aware, is a very large state, and there are a lot of counties. There's 58 counties, and what works in one county might not be the right fit for another county. The toolkit was designed to have some flexibility in mind so that each jurisdiction can find and implement solutions that align with their unique context and population. Now, with all these challenges in mind, the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit was developed to simplify the process, support informed decision-making, and ultimately help practitioners implement programs that are both evidence-based and locally relevant. This figure here just provides a nice visual of the work that went into the toolkit's development. And the reason I want to point this out is just so that you know before you even open the toolkit, a variety of methods and a lot of thought and collaboration went into creating it. And this included practitioner and content expert interviews, a systematic literature review, and consultations with 2 community advisory boards. If you are interested in reading more about the full scope of the methods that went into the toolkit's creation, we can drop that link into the chat. So it's a lengthy document, but it's very interesting and gives a lot of detail about how the toolkit was created and some of the methods that went into it. All right, so we'll drop that link into the chat. Now the exciting part, the toolkit is publicly available. If you didn't already know this, you can access it right now and start using it immediately. So you can access the toolkit by visiting the OYCR resources webpage, and we'll drop that link into the chat as well for you. But note that the toolkit is a free resource. It doesn't cost you anything. You also don't have to download any software to use it. It's an entirely web-based platform, which makes it really simple to get started right away with. As I said, software isn't required. You just visit this dashboard. And when you visit the website, this is what it'll look like. You'll see this interface, and you can go ahead and get started using it once you visit the website. And we'll walk you through some of the features and how you would get started with that here in a minute. All right, we have one more poll question for you to submit right now. And so what I'd like you to answer now is to take a best guess about how many programs and practices are included in the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit. All right, results are in. If you guessed 234 programs and practices, you're correct. So 15% of you guessed correctly. But I want to just emphasize that the toolkit includes information on 234 programs and practices for now. And the reason I say for now is because there are plans to continue updating the toolkit, continue adding programs and practices to it. And we'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. But long story short, we don't anticipate that it's going to stay at 234. We anticipate that that number is going to change as the toolkit continues to get updated and as more research comes in. So of the 234 programs and practices that are available, 79% have an implementation toolkit available, meaning that there's guidance offered on aspects to consider for those particular programs and practices when you're deciding how best to move forward with a program or practice that you'd like to select. And the statistics listed here are examples of characteristics by which you could search the toolkit. For example, there are breakdowns available in the toolkit regarding juvenile justice involvement, mental health, and race. Therefore, if you're looking to be responsive to one or multiple of those areas in particular, the toolkit is capable of helping you narrow your search and zeroing in on a range of areas. All right, so I posed the question earlier, what do we mean by evidence-based, and emphasize there are different kind of levels of evidence. So the 234 programs and practices housed in the toolkit come with a classification of 5 different categories of evidence for the different programs and practices. And I'm just going to offer you a glance of each of these categories here briefly. So if you see a program or practice that's classified as evidence-based, this means strong evidence and that at least 2 research studies were found by the developers of the toolkit that contribute strong evidence of the program or practice being effective. And at least one of those studies had to be a replication study that did not involve the intervention developers. So this is the highest threshold of evidence among the 5 categories, and it offers the most confidence that programs and practices are effective. And within the toolkit, a total of 32 programs and practices are categorized as evidence-based. Now, as we go down the other categories, the amount of evidence behind the program or practice declines. With emerging, that means that there's moderate evidence behind it, and there's 56 programs or practices classified in the toolkit as emerging. And to meet this classification, the developers of the toolkit had to have found positive effects of the program or practice in at least one research study that contributes strong evidence. Moving on to the third category is exploratory, and there's 98 programs or practices classified in this manner. Exploratory means that limited evidence has been found about the program or practice, but that evidence isn't as strong as the evidence-based or emerging categories, at least not yet. I mentioned earlier that 79% of programs and practices include an implementation toolkit supplement. So this is a good time to point out that the implementation toolkit is available for the top 3 categories of evidence. So if a program or practice is listed as evidence-based, emerging, or exploratory, you'll find this implementation toolkit supplement. And so just keep that in mind. It's not a resource for all 234, but it is for the top 3 categories. All right, if a program or practice is classified as no effects, there was no research identified by the developers of the toolkit to indicate beneficial effects. And if a program or practice is classified as insufficient evidence, mixed evidence was found, making it impossible to determine at the time how to classify that program or practice. So you'll see there's 45 programs and practices that fall within those categories. And the last classification, evidence classification category is harmful effects. So harmful effects were also considered, and programs or practices considered to be harmful have been examined in the research with at least some results indicating that those programs or practices can actually get us further away from our intended outcomes. For example, if our intended outcome was to reduce antisocial thinking, and a program was found by the research to increase rather than to decrease antisocial thinking, this would be considered harmful. So that hopefully gives you a nice quick overview of the different categories of evidence. And what I'm going to do now that you've heard a little bit about the toolkit and its background, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to tell you a little bit about the features of the toolkit and give you a sneak peek about how to use it.
Thank you for that, Megan. And yeah, certainly see in the chat that some of the links are being finicky right now. So we'll hopefully get that figured out. But now that you've heard a bit about that toolkit's background, let's dive in. Let's take a look to see what this actually is. So, certainly when we think about this, at this stage, we've discussed the Juvenile Justice Toolkit and its framework. So we're going to explore the reasons for its usefulness of the toolkit and really how it can simplify your work and really your life. So many of you likely encountered difficulties when responding to urgent inquiries from key stakeholders, especially within a county setting. So for instance, let's imagine that a significant event occurs in your county that garners some sort of media attention, or a trend that emerges that you need to address some sort of way proactively, or in this case, pretty reactively. So you receive that call and they say, well, the question that you really didn't want to hear at that moment is, so what steps are you going to do in response to this? So you might struggle with several challenges. So first is, what's that pressure? What's the deadline? Deadlines are tight, right? Next, at this point, if you're anything like me, you're like, okay, now I have a tight deadline. Now I'm feeling really stressed, right? And now we start thinking to ourselves, especially if there's a lack of clear information regarding the available resources, right? And then alongside that, right, you start to feel that exhaustion, that fatigue, the burnout, and that sense of being overwhelmed of, well, what do we do? People are looking at us, right? And So as you start doing your search, you might come across a potential solution, find yourself questioning, well, is this program evidence, right? And you're not a research expert, right? And due to that uncertainty and that credibility of the information you have, right? Navigating research is difficult, right? And we find ourselves that it can be confusing, and that only adds to that level of complexity of those decisions. So this is really where that California Juvenile Justice Toolkit swoops in, right? So it really is designed to help you navigate and overcome various obstacles, right? So really in this segment of our presentation, we're going to explore the practical uses of that toolkit. And shortly, we're going to present a short tutorial video that will guide you on really how to effectively utilize this resource in the future. So what you'll see on this slide is Megan identified this earlier. You can see on that dashboard for the toolkit website, it serves that clear purpose. It assists in the implementation of programs and practices aimed at youth, including or involved in the juvenile justice system. It does provide essential information on evidence-based, emerging, and exploratory programs that Megan just discussed. And when you think about the usefulness of this, the toolkit is tailored for a diverse range of users, including juvenile probation officers and various community-based organizations that work with youth. So when we think about the benefits of this toolkit, right, number one is it makes it easier to find and compare programs for youth in the system. And if you're anything like me, right, it saves that time and helps team make really informed decisions when it needs to be quickly made. It also provides details on implementation steps, funding opportunities, and again, those evidence-based practices, creating a shared understanding across a number of teams, right? So, certainly looking at this as we think about, right, we hear the research saying what's evidence-based, right? How do we get this? When we think of funding, right, it's going to be provided in this for you. So you've got that as this free resource that gives you that quick access to the essential information to support planning and that collaboration. So on the next slide, we're going to get started. We're going to show you a short video that's going to introduce key definitions and show you how to use that toolkit effectively.
Welcome to the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit. This toolkit was developed by RAND in partnership with the Council of Criminal Justice and Behavioral Health and the Office of Youth and Community Restoration. This toolkit is designed to provide comprehensive resources on options for youth programming for professionals working in and adjacent to the juvenile legal system, as well as individuals impacted by it. The toolkit houses information on over 200 programs and practices, the level of evidence behind them, and notes about their implementation. This is the home screen for the toolkit, and it provides the purpose of the toolkit, the intended users of the toolkit, and notes on data sources. From this home screen, you'll notice at the top left of the screen that there are 3 options. Instructions to guide your inquiry or search and comparison of programs. Definitions. A page to explain key terms and phrases from the programs and practices you'll find in the toolkit. And funding. Potential funding opportunities to support implementation decisions from any programs or practices you find in the toolkit. To begin using the toolkit, click step 1 of the instructions box on the right side of the screen. From the new page, you can see that there are 2 ways to use the toolkit. First, you can search by keyword. In the search box, you can enter any terms related to the programs or practices you're looking for. Once you type in your keyword or phrase, hit the enter button, and you'll see a list of relevant programs and practices on the right side of the screen. For example, if you were to search for programs and practices related to mental health, type that phrase in the search by keyword box. Click enter, and note the results on the right hand of the screen. Results suggest that there are 42 programs and practices included in the toolkit that are related to mental health. To see more details about the search by keyword results, click the triple line icon below the search box. To further compare programs and practices in detail, click the Next Step button in the top right corner. Alternatively, the second way to use the toolkit is to use the filter functions. Select the previous step button in the upper right corner. From this home screen, you can identify specific programs or practices that you're interested in or filter out specific outcomes or demographic information relevant to your search. Each information icon by the filter drop-down menu explains the options and definitions for that specific field. For example, each program or practice has been identified and classified according to the evidence base available. By clicking the icon on the level of evidence option, we can see that there are 6 levels of evidence. If we select the evidence-based strong evidence option, we can see on the right-hand side of the screen that there are 8 programs in the toolkit that meet this classification for mental health. Once all the appropriate filters have been selected, click the Next Step button on the top right corner. The results of your search are shown with the program and practice options to the left of the screen. The youth characteristics, service characteristics, evidence base, and other characteristics are listed across the top. You can scroll down from the right side to search the different programs under the filters you've selected. Or you can scroll to the right at the bottom to search for various characteristics from the rest of the filters. Once you have the list of programs or practices you're interested in based on the filters you selected, you can also filter by topic again. Within this option, you can focus solely on programmable characteristics, outcomes addressed, or demographic information. To look in a specific program, use your cursor to select it, which will highlight it, and then click the Next Step button in the top right corner. Be sure to filter by all details. From the list, select the program. Once that program is shown on the screen, you can view the program details that were listed in the filter. You can also look at the implementation toolkit details for other program practices or characteristics, purveyor and training organization information, and implementation support if available. Also at the bottom of the screen, you'll find additional site functions to help you search. These options include referring or undoing your last action, resetting your view, going back to the beginning of the toolkit, downloading the data that you've viewed or interested in looking more at, viewing all the information in full screen, or sharing the toolkit and information you found. You can reset the toolkit as many times as you need to find the right programs and characteristics that you're interested in. The toolkit is designed to be user-friendly and accessible, ensuring that practitioners and community members can easily find and utilize the resources they need to support youth in the juvenile justice system. Thank you for watching this overview of the California Juvenile Justice Toolkit. We hope you find it helpful in your important work.
All right. Cool. That is a shout out to Jess Warner. She was the one who put together the video here, but certainly as we think about this video, and when we think about the links of things, really take some time to explore that toolkit. It does offer those search filters that are going to help you find those relevant programs. When we think of things like youth characteristics, primary needs, delivery settings, all sorts of different avenues that you can really search and shrink that down. So you can refine that search based on factors like behavior challenges, mental health, substance use, and find those right resources. So we had the video and certainly want to just kind of throw some other kind of quick clicks on here to kind of see what that looks like, right? So just another quick walkthrough, right? So upon clicking on that number one, right, you're going to see the search programs and practice. You're going to be taken into this database, and in this section, you're going to choose from various parameters like the program practice characteristics or outcomes addressed for demographic information, which are going to help you identify really suitable programs to kind of assist your youth in your county, right? So as you can see, the initial page here has a total of 234 distinct programs. And you might be sitting there thinking, that's a lot. How am I going to navigate through this, right? So really the big thing that we want to think about here is you've got a couple options. First, you can search by the keyword, right? And by clicking the search programs practice, right, it opens that database where you can filter them. And just by simply typing in the word substance abuse, it takes that from 234 down to 90 programs. Okay. Another option, an alternative method, is where you can use the drop-down menus, right? So you can refine your search is to look at those drop-down options, allowing you to select multiple criteria that align with the needs of the youth that you serve. So for instance, let's say your primary concern is on substance use, right? So you click and get that drop-down menu for substance use, right? And under primary need, right? And then the section labeled typical setting for delivery, maybe your curiosity is thinking, okay, what's available in outpatient, day treatment center, residential inpatient, right? All sorts of just different elements here, okay? And just by doing that, you can see that it's now narrowed this down to 30, from 234 to 38 programs. So you can further your explore your options by proceeding to the next step by simply clicking next step. So what's going to happen here is once you click next step, the toolkit is then going to guide you to where you can compare search results. On this page, you're going to find a comprehensive list of programs that meet that specified criteria. Okay. So the search parameters will reflect your previous sections. And for instance, let's say you're curious about this program called Seeking Safety, right? So you'll click on Seeking Safety and then you'll click Next Step. And what's going to happen here is it's going to take you to this third page where you're going to have that drop-down option, and you're going to simply click Seeking Safety. And from that point, what's going to happen is you're going to see a couple boxes here, right? So number one is you've got the program details. Really, that's going to recap what you searched in that very first step. But the other section at the bottom, right, is that implementation toolkit details. So here you're going to find that analysis of the specifics related to implementation toolkit details. These particulars are going to be essential considerations really for your agency when choosing this program, right? So as you look at that, you're going to see things about what are the costs? What are the training? What's the training options look like? How can this be delivered? Could this be something that can be delivered in the home, in the community? It's going to look at options that are going to give you see who are the program developers, right? So lots of information that when we think about rollout plans that are going to be really pivotal into what we do, right? So the big thing that I do want to reinforce is remember when you see the implementation toolkit, right, that Megan discussed earlier, these are those programs that are rated as evidence-based, emerging, or exploratory. Okay, so this is one of those top three. So let's say you're searching and using that toolkit and you land on that third step and you don't see the implementation toolkit details on the bottom. that just means that the programs or practice are not in one of those top 3 categories that we talked about. Okay. So, big, broad, quick overview of things. Let's talk about what's happening now. So, the video earlier and that quick walkthrough, right, might make that toolkit look really easy to use, right? But for many of you, as you indicated in the surveys before, this is really your first time hearing about it or exploring it. So you might be curious, but unsure how to apply this effectively. This is where the UCCI comes in, right? This is where we're looking at providing training and support to help you begin confidence and skill in using this California Juvenile Justice Toolkit. Right? So really when we think about this, to ensure that really counties and agencies are informed about the various emerging and evidence-based practices available for youth involved in the system, OYCR is offering all counties access to training and technical assistance related to the toolkit. This is being facilitated by us at UCCI. We're eager to contribute to this initiative. Really, our primary objective here is to assist counties in effectively utilizing the toolkit by providing accessible training and technical assistance really throughout that state. Right? And so you'll see on this slide, right, we understand that each agency, county, everyone operates differently. That's what makes this field so beautiful, right? So you'll see on the slide that people progress at their own pace. So UCCI is going to offer technical assistance categorized into 3 tiers: light, basic, and enhanced, depending on your needs and interests. These interests will be evaluated based on information provided in the technical assistance inquiry form that's going to be released a little later on, right? But it's really important to understand that these categories are not all inclusive of these services. Agencies receiving light services might look at us sharing resources related to that toolkit training, right? So it might just be that self-sufficient, give us the information. Basic support, that level 2, provides fundamental technical help for agencies using the toolkit. This could be personalized question and answer sessions regarding implementation. And then that enhanced support that you'll see on the right side here is that enhanced is really thinking about tailored for those folks using that toolkit that are thinking maybe long-term implementation, which could involve some series of action planning, right? So it's a very 30,000-foot overview, but all sorts of different levels. But as you saw the videos, as you saw kind of the information, and Megan talked about that, we're going to fall into our last survey here. And we're just curious to think what level of toolkit training and technical assistance would be most useful for you. It's fun to watch these come in. It's kind of like when you're adjusting your music settings on the in your car. How much bass do I want? Yeah, so it looks like as this is wrapping up here, right? Looks like a good combination of you, or a lot, 41% of you see a combination of all, which is pretty cool to see, right? We see some are interested in some light support, so 27% and 24% into that basic support, and then 8% are looking at kind of the longer term stuff. So I love it. So certainly as we navigate through. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I captured this. Is we've got some stuff that we're pretty excited about. We're thinking about this feedback loop when it comes to this project. We've created a community advisory board with individuals who have firsthand experience and indirect experience within the correction system. So this could be those in community supervision, formerly incarcerated individuals, youth, families, and advocates. So their insights are going to help us refine and improve this toolkit, making it more effective resource. Certainly when we think about this is providers will soon receive details on how to share feedback with RAND. As they explore the toolkit, they can start considering the input that they'd like to offer. And really, as this project evolves, right, we're working with our community advisory board, we're working with RAND, we're working with OYCR to gather insights of really how do we make this a long-term successful program. So we think about how do we improve this, and it really involves everybody here. So since it's a new initiative, ongoing feedback is really going to help refine its effectiveness. And we're going to compile key findings and lessons learned into some report down the road, ensuring that the toolkit continues to support agencies and providing the best services for youth. So that was really kind of the big meat and potatoes of everything. I've seen the chat of a lot of questions coming in, so I haven't had time to really look at those, but certainly inviting Megan to unmute and rejoin some of those, and also for Jen to help us navigate through those questions here.
And
Yeah, I
Eric
can
and
jump
Megan,
in too.
they're compiled there so that you don't have to weed through. If I missed anyone's question, feel free to repost, but I think I got all of them besides the ones asking for link clarity.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, let me just scroll up here to the first question.
I have some already kind of documented too.
Sure,
So I
go
can
ahead,
chime
Jen.
in. The first question that I saw was, does every state have a toolkit? The answer here is no, not every state has a toolkit. There is a national resource, it's kind of a toolkit available on the juvenile justice programs across the nation. That's offered through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, though I will say that the search criteria are different. So if anyone's interested in more information on that, feel free to follow up with us through that email address to the toolkit website. But everything that is most important to California is already included in your juvenile justice toolkit here that RAND has created and developed for you. The next question that I saw come through was, and I apologize that my video is not on really quickly. I'm having a little bit of connection issues here at the office today. Megan and Eric have joined from home, and it seems like they're having better luck than I am. So I'm just trying to keep my video off so I can keep sound running well. The next question that we have is from Kate, and Kate says, many evidence-based programs were developed within dominant cultural frameworks and may not reflect the values, wisdom, or lived experience of the youth they're intended to serve. And so how can systems better reconcile the demand for evidence-based practices with the need for culturally grounded, community-informed, and youth-centered approaches, especially when local approaches rooted in neighborhoods and community may not have the data to back them up as evidence-based as of yet. And the question specifically is, how is RAND shifting to include cultural value in evidence measuring? I am going to tap into Megan to answer a little bit more of this. Megan, if you're available.
Yep. I love this question. I really appreciate that this was asked. And the best answer I have for you about this question right now is that RAND is targeting this directly with the phase of updates with the toolkit. They're looking specifically to add a component to the toolkit that is community-defined evidence, and including programs and practices that are identified locally by community members, by youth advisory boards, by people working directly with youth in the community, to help bridge that gap or identify that knowledge gap, or maybe there is a program and practice that is working really well, but there's not funding yet available to test it, or a study hasn't been published on it yet. Like maybe a lot of data is collected on outcomes, but we all know that the peer review process moves at a glacial pace, and it could take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to get a study published. So the link that was sent out earlier on if you have suggestions for updates to the toolkit, that will be where I would recommend that you go to provide, as a starting point, to provide suggestions for the toolkit, particularly as you point out, if there's something that is culturally relevant, or if there's something that is coming across as exclusionary that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Megan. The next question we have is from Sean. Every Is every program in the OYCR toolkit available across the state, or is it something that is regionally limited? Megan or Eric, you want to jump in on this one?
Yes. So the programs and practices in the toolkit are all available in California. So I say that with the caveat being that sometimes you have to spend money to adopt a program or practice. So resources obviously are important, and getting your staff trained up on a program or practice can, involve certain funding requests and costs. So theoretically, these programs are available across the state, but funding considerations are relevant. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Megan. The next question we have is from Kate. I've been training LGBTQ plus cultural responsiveness for 20 plus years. Please define sexual minority. Minority is not a term I've seen embraced by most of the groups. Why not just say LGBTQ plus? This is a great question, and because the UCC DI did not develop the toolkit, I think this is one we might want to take back to Rand and get a little clarity on before we respond. Megan and Eric, I just wanted to check with you though.
Yeah, we could certainly ask for a little more context, but what I will say is if you visit the toolkit and you look at the different criteria in the search, when you see the sexual minority option, click on the little I. There's like a little icon that is it says I and then there's a black circle around it. That will give you the definition for every single classification category. And for sexual minority, it's defined as youth whose self-identified sexual orientation is not straight or heterosexual. And then in parentheses, it says lesbian, gay, bisexual, etc. So that answers part of your question of please define the definition. But I can't personally speak to why that specific term was created. I do think it's good feedback to bring back to the creators.
Thank you, Megan. Our next question is from Louise. How is the info in the toolkit kept updated? Megan dropped something in the chat, but I do want to bring it out to everyone. If you or your agency would like to add any recommendations to the toolkit, if you notice something that, hey, doesn't seem necessarily on par with your understanding of the program, if you've already adopted it or you're looking to adopt it, we do have some follow-up feedback loop mechanisms in place. And so there is a forms link that will submit ongoing updates to the RAND team for ongoing development of the toolkit as well. And so that is currently the mechanism for keeping it updated, is that feedback loop. Additionally, we are exploring some longer term opportunities with OYCR and RAND as to maybe is there a mile marker by which we seek to do a more thorough review of everything. At this point, the only permanent thing that we can say is the initial effort that was done to review all the programs has been completed, and we're kind of just at this point again just relying on the ongoing feedback loop. Megan, anything you'd like to add to that, Eric?
The only thing I wanted to add is I dropped the link in the chat again, just so it's fresh for everybody to access.
Thank you, Megan.
If you're thinking of a program or practice that should be considered, go ahead and fill out that form or take it back to your team. Maybe a team member will have a suggestion that wasn't here today.
Thank you for
Yes.
that. I did want to be cognizant of the time for the closeout. First of all, I'm speaking on behalf of the UCCI. Thank you for having us today and hearing our presentation. We do have an email address if you have some of those questions. I know there was a lot of questions that popped in that we weren't able to get to, but we can do our best to respond to those and send them back out. But you can see our email address there, and then our website for the UCCI. So certainly ready to pass it back to, I believe it was Mika.
Yeah.
I want to say we appreciate our speakers for coming on and sharing your expertise, and everyone who's been part of this conversation, making this work a lot easier and creating a standard that can be held across California. It's such important work, and I just want to thank you guys for all that you're doing. We have a few statements to give before we end the webinar. One is if you would like to we want to remind everyone that this webinar recording will be available for on the OYCR website by the end of the week, and you'll receive a copy of the slides via email. 2, we welcome you to take the survey to provide feedback on your experiences for today's webinar, and the link is available in the chat. Also, please save the date for the next OYCR series, July 15th, and you can use the link in the chat to register for the upcoming sessions. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you, everybody.